Hello, 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 and welcome to What the Trans.
What the trans?
Oh fuck, it's Ashleigh. Ashleigh's back, everyone. Check it out. Ashleigh's here. Woo!
Yes, I have materialised next to you in our studio, which are a couple of 100 miles apart. So, yes. But yes, hello everybody, I return. I needed to take some time off, partly because it was Christmas, but also partly because I was going a little bit unhealthy.
Are you
but now
healthier now, or?
I am better now, yes. I am dealing with things in a... Yeah, everything... Well, I wouldn't say everything is fine, because obviously everything is not fine, otherwise we wouldn't be doing this podcast. But yes, in the kind of microcosm, my life sense, everything is basically okay, and I'm better than where I was before, I hope. So, hello Michelle, how's it been without me?
It's been very strange, because I've been mostly talking to, my bedroom wall.
I did hear that.
On my own. My bedroom wall is pretty great, it's got me through some hard times, it's literally kept a roof over my head. But it's not quite the same as talking to a human. I prefer that, and you're a pretty good human, so I prefer you over the wall.
That's fair. I mean, let's not interpret that as any kind of political statement.
No, I'm for some walls. I am for some walls that have roofs. I'm not really for walls that just are walls.
Yeah, with nothing attached to them apart from the odd
I don't
watchtower
like walls
or
with
something.
racial overtones, with racist overtones. Racist walls I'm not cool with. Racist doors, racist roofs, all racist masonry I am very much against.
Yeah, absolutely. Damn that racist masonry? No, I can't do it. I can't think of anything funny to say, so
That was pretty good.
Yeah, well, let's pick it all up where we left off and do the podcast. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah, hell yes. I'm ready. I am a sneezy mess, but I am ready. Let's do this.
I have just recovered from being a sneezy mess, and in fact, being a sneezy mess was at its worst last weekend, so our first story was something that I only picked up on when it was sort of halfway starting, really, because it just sort of sprung up when I wasn't really paying attention. And so we, of course, begin with the prominent left-wing gaming YouTuber whose decision to raise some money for UK trans kids charity Mermaids got a little bit out of hand as the whole thing blew up and went absolutely global. Harris Brewis, better known as Hbomberguy, YouTuber, cis man, an absolute hero apparently, raised over £260,000, that's more than $250,000, for Mermaids by streaming Donkey Kong 64 on Twitch. So, according to a video he released that was announcing the stream, he decided to raise money for Mermaids, more or less as a direct response to transphobic shit nugget Graham Linehan, which, as motivations go, is a pretty good one. We like it. Totally here for it. Harris promised that he would not stop streaming until he had completed the game 101%, a feat which took him the best part of, slightly over 57 hours, and our own intrepid reporter on the spot, Michelle, was there for almost all of it. So what the hell happened? Come on, take me through it.
Right, well, I sort of heard about this stream because I follow Hbomberguy Harris on YouTube. I'm a big fan of the whole left tube thing that's going on right now, and he's very much a part of it. And so he released this video that made me laugh because he was just like, I picked Mermaids because Graham Linehan is doing a very normal man thing of bitching about trans people on Twitter all day. So I picked that out of spite, and it's like, okay, I'm down with that. I'll give that a go. And I have a Twitch account that I never use, so I went on. And I even got to be on the stream for a bit, because I basically pestered KC Explosion into getting me on, because I really want to talk about some of the things that I've been facing with the work capability assessments that I talked about last time.
Yes.
So yeah, I sort of got, I watched it for pretty much the full 3 days, because I have no job and no life, and, I love Nintendo stuff. So, I sat there and I watched the whole thing pretty much. I took breaks to sleep when Harris slept, so I pretty much watched the whole thing. And it was on the last day that I sort of got onto the stream. And then from there they had a Discord, chat room thing. So I was basically sort of a digital groupie for the rest of it. I was in this little chat room off to the side, adjacent, full of all the people that were also going to go onto the thing. It got really, really silly on the third day when people that I've heard of and are really famous started coming in, like ContraPoints, the famous YouTuber, Sean, Philosophy Tube. Those are like YouTuber gods on the left. But then something really strange happened when I got on and got to talk to Chelsea Manning for a bit, which was very bizarre. Like, she was there for, like, almost a day and a half straight. Like, she went to bed but then came back, and yeah, Paris Lee showed up in the Discord, and she'd never used Discord before and had no idea what she was doing, so I had to teach her through how to get onto the main stream.
Nice.
Adam Conover from Adam Ruins Everything was there. He's a particularly great comedian that I love a lot, and I did not expect to see him show up there. Mara Wilson, the writer who played Matilda when she was a kid, she showed up in there, which I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, it's just...
It just sort of blew up because the whole stream, it was just this guy playing Donkey Kong 64, which is not a great game. Don't bother playing it. It's a bit crap. But then suddenly it's like everyone started to hear about this stream that was going on as a sort of fuck you to Graham Linehan. And then suddenly, like, the donations around the second day started to go through the roof.
And this was the point from which I was paying attention, and it was just overwhelmingly... I mean, amazing, but yeah, because you were keeping me updated up to a point as well, and like some of the... Well, I mean, carry on, please.
Yeah, like, I was just watching it, like, I had it on the background whilst I was doing my stuff, and, and I thought, I'd quite like to go on there, because he was getting trans people to go on there and talk about their stuff, and I have a pet issue, and I want to go on there and talk about that. Any chance of a platform to spread some awareness of some certain things, I'm going to take it. But yeah. And so I went on when it was still fairly sane, but then a few hours later, suddenly the famous people started to show up. Like, the Guardian journalist Owen Jones showed up for a bit, and then it got really, really silly, where John Romero, the guy who made Doom, was on there for some reason. Like, apparently one of the mods who was, like, sort of sorting out the Discord and all the guests and stuff on the stream was, like his landlord or something. I don't know what the relationship is there, but yeah, like, he just came on, said trans rights, it was nice. And then the headline act came in, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I've not gotten any better at saying names, Ashleigh, whilst you've been away. I've not gotten any better at it. But yeah, the infamous congresswoman from New York's 14th Congressional District and the latest Fox News boogeyman came on and, voiced his support for trans rights and stuff. And all of this was just for, like, a tiny little UK charity that most people outside of the UK never heard of. It's become a sort of political football. It was really bizarre, really awesome, and anyone who was watching the stream will know what I mean when I say fuck beaver bother. It's a mini game that took Harris about 2 hours to do. It looked like a nightmare. He had to go and get like professional Donkey Kong 64 speedrunners in to teach him how to do it. It got really absurd. But yeah, he's played it constant. Like, he slept twice during the whole thing, but he just streamed the whole thing, and there were thousands of donations coming in. Like, the highest donation was about $5,000. So, like, the vast majority of them are around $5 donations, not a lot. This is just... Hundreds of thousands of people must have seen this stream. Like, when I went on it twice. Once near the end as well, when I just shouted him along like a... one of the mods sort of appointed me as a cheerleader, so I had to go back on and shout him over the finish line, which I'm very proud of. I did my part.
Good.
But yeah, like, when I first went on, there was about 10,000 people watching. On the last bit, there was about 30,000 people, give or take, by the end.
Yeah.
It just got ridiculously huge, and it was great, because you never see gamers do this shit. You never ever see gamers in the news for doing good, and Hbomberguy's a bit of a gamer, a bit of a streamer, but mostly a YouTube guy. It was just a really cool thing that happened. This young guy was like, oh, Graham Linehan's being a dick, I'm going to go and play Donkey Kong until I drop down dead, and I'm going to raise a bit of money. And he was like, I'm going to raise maybe, like, at most $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kept going up and up and up, and he raised, like, $340,000 is not to be sniffed at, and almost half the stuff that Graham Linehan got taken off mermaids.
Yeah. Well, it's let's not overstate the case there. The fact is, Linehan made the effort to do that. The jury's still out on what the results of that will be, but the fact is, he engaged in a campaign to take money from children. It's like, literally, are you a Dickens villain? Are you, like, just hoping to get all of these vulnerable trans kids into some sort of workhouse for you to abuse, because that's the kind of level of nastiness that Linehan is now displaying. So this whole thing, this wonderful stream, was like, as a counterpoint to that, it was pretty good. Cheered a lot of people up. It had like a significant impact, because obviously while it was taking place on the Sunday when I was recovered slightly, I was talking to some people who are involved with mermaids, right? So parents and youngsters and stuff. And they were just like, this is so amazing as a gesture to, obviously, to provide the charity with money, to raise its profile, and to give hope to so many, many young trans people for whom the last few months has been a constant slog of difficulty and nastiness and lies in the press. And suddenly this comes along, raises over £250,000, gets everybody and their dog weighing in, including, I read, the man who voiced Donkey Kong on the games, who jumped into the stream and said, "Trans rights!"
Oh, yeah, he showed up. That's how many people showed up. I've completely forgotten about him. Josh Sawyer, the guy who made Fallout New Vegas, that game that weirdly all trans women seem to love. He showed up for a bit. It was a very, very bizarre, surreal experience for me, because I got to meet a lot of my heroes. I got to...
Yes.
I was supposed to go to Brighton to my friend's birthday. That was the plan. But then the National Express fucked me over. They cancelled my coach. The coach stopped, but not the whole coach, so I'd have to travel to the other side of London to get it, and I would have missed it, and there's no way I could have afforded to get another coach, so I was stuck in London, so I was just watching the stream, just kind of, pissed off that I wasn't able to see my friend for her birthday. Hi, Rach, if you're listening. And, yeah, this happened, and it was just it reminded me of when I was a journalist and I'd do events, because I did events where people would, people you see off the telly and stuff would turn up, and it felt like that, only it was 4 a.m, in my flat, and I'm in my pajamas, shouting, typing vigorously into my phone, telling Parasleys how to use Discord. It was a very bizarre weekend for me, but a very, very good one for trans kids. And Susie Green, the CEO of Mermaids, came on for a bit.
Yes.
She was gushing, she was loving it. Because she didn't really strike me as much as a gamer. She didn't really know what Donkey Kong was or Twitch. I'm pretty sure she had to make a Twitch account to come on and say thanks. It was just such a lovely thing to see. You never ever really hear about stuff like this from the internet. The internet doing actual good. It's mostly Nazis and turds and horrors and nightmares. And this was very much not that. There were no trolls in the chat either. It was just all lovely people saying lovely things for 3 days. It really made me forget about the current state of trans discourse in the UK. So yeah, it was a lovely thing. Very, very glad to have watched...
Absolutely.
Watch Donkey Kong 64, and fuck that game. It is such a silly game. Don't bother playing it. It almost killed Hbomberguy. Don't do it yourself.
Fair enough. I remember, because I had to calm you down after all of this at the end of the weekend, and I'm wondering if I'm going to have to do that again once we finish recording here, because you are gushing, my girl. It's lovely.
Because it was such an awesome thing. You'd never seen it. But anyway,
I know, I totally agree. It's fantastic, but I do think we need to,
let's go.
Crack on,
I'm
I think.
sorry.
Yeah,
let's go move on to some actual terrible news. I've got something from America right now to tell you about.
Go on, then.
So,
what's the damage?
Well... It's sort of been misreported in a couple of ways and stuff, and I'll get to that in a sec, but the news is that the United States Supreme Court has ruled in favour of Donald Trump's ban on transgender people in the military. But the ban is still yet to go into effect. That's the important thing, as there's still one injunction still in place in the country that prevents Trump from kicking off this vicious and ridiculous ban. So... Since Trump announced his intentions to ban trans people back in 2017, legal action has been taken all over America in an attempt to protect trans service members and kill the ban dead. As a result, several judges have imposed injunctions that have halted the implementation of the ban until after these court challenges have concluded. Subsequently, Trump appealed to the Supreme Court to have the injunction struck down so he could begin banning trans people like the shitty goblin man that he is. And the court ruled in his favour 5-4, surprising no one, because the 5 conservative judges voted in favour of the ban, including his, pet alleged rapist Brett Kavanaugh. But there is one injunction left that is still holding back the ban. So today, as we are recording, the trans ban is not happening. But according to Mark Joseph Stern, a reporter for the online magazine Slate, this injunction is likely to be thrown out also because, they throw out a whole bunch of other injunctions. Why would they keep this one? They're not that different. Whilst the fight is still ongoing, the roughly 10,000 trans people currently serving in the American military are stuck in a limbo that is quite cruel and unfair, but it is not only them who are stuck in an uncertainty hole. Things are looking bleak for US trans people across the board, as this military ban appears to be the start of a concerted anti-trans campaign led by their piss bucket of a president. Back in October, the New York Times reported that the Trump administration was considering redefining gender as a biological, immutable condition that could result in widespread oppression of trans people and the suppression of trans rights. So here is what you can do to help. There are 2 groups you can throw a few quid at if you have the means. First up, the Lambda Legal Organisation, as I mentioned before. If you go to lambdalegal.org, you can donate to them some cash that will go directly into fighting against the trans military ban on the ground. You should also check out the American Civil Liberties Union, who do similar work but also helps out immigrants, women, and other perpetual targets by this nightmare and administration. You can check them out at aclu.org, and their details will be in the description of this episode.
Yes, so latest in a long-running line of awfulness from this, religious fundamental fascism, which has taken over the US. And as has been pointed out by a lot of people, it's not, they're not starting to roll back the rights of trans and LGBT people. They've already done that. That whole poem about first they came for the socialists and whatever. We're like five paragraphs into that now. It's, we're not at the start of anything. It's been rolling for a while. And so banning people from serving in the military, banning people from then holding public office, banning them from being able to access healthcare. This is all healthcare, rather. So this is all traditional, straight out of the authoritarian playbook to try and limit the amount that people are able to, people who the regime doesn't like are able to participate in public life. It's the thin end of the wedge. And so there may well be, as we've spoken before, there's people like, who existed gays for Trump, UKIP LGBT here in the UK, all that sort of thing. It's you guys next, honestly. The trans people, and then it's everybody. It's, if you think you're safe because you're a Republican gay man, you're not. This is the thin end of the wedge, and it has to be resisted, which is why we're talking about Lambda Legal and the American Civil Liberties Union, neither of which is an absolutely perfect, blemishless organisation, but the fact is they are, at this very moment, opposing this ridiculous administration and the many, many terrible things that it stands for. So, yes, check them out. ACLU, Lambda Legal. Donate if you can, Signal Boost if you can't, all of that solidarity stuff. Because we need it. We need to be together on this one. Yes, there we go. Woot! There's a lot to say about this, isn't there, really? It's particularly annoying because, when people are talking about when Trump's military ban was first announced, it's like, it wasn't announced. He put it on Twitter, for Christ's sake. There wasn't any initial announcement as such that came through the legal system. The first anybody ever heard of it was when President Trump starts posting about trans people in the military on Twitter. And now there is legislation. That is not a way to run a government, frankly.
Well, he's not really been running a government. He's sort of orchestrated the longest governmental shutdown in US history, which, to a British person, it sounds really, really, really odd that somebody could do that. That someone could shut down the country's government. Like, I don't think we can do that here.
I mean, they're kind of already doing it, aren't they? Like, the UK government isn't really doing very much at the moment, apart from trying to tear itself to pieces.
Yeah, but I mean,
that's a topic for another time, I think. So
yeah, there's no mechanism in place for the Prime Minister to shut down the government. Like, the government is going to roll on. Like, she could dissolve Parliament, like, for any number of reasons, but I don't think she could be like, the government's over, no one's getting paid, don't show up to work, librarians and forest people and all sorts, like, because our system is flawed, but that's one thing I'm quite fond of having. But anyway, But yeah, I mean, this is just a big thing for his base. Like, people keep saying, but it makes no sense. Why would you ban trans people? It doesn't have anything to do with, like, combat effectiveness. And they know. They know. They're doing it because it's going to get votes in 2020. Because Trump's going to be able to be like, look, Elizabeth Warren and what's-her-face and the other one and all the people that may have announced since we recorded this, they want to, make America a social experiment and get all of these, degenerate cretins into the army and, all this stuff. And that's just an easy way to win over the votes of bigots. But yeah, he gets to, it's a vote winner for him. Yeah. That's what it is. That's pure and simple. People should stop wasting their time saying, oh, but it makes no logical sense. Because logical argument, it isn't a logical argument. It makes no sense.
The time for that was a long time ago, and I think there was an article in The Atlantic that put this really well, which is the cruelty is the point, essentially. He's just appealing more and more to the baser instincts of, his base, and it's working. People that think, cultural Marxism, there are too many immigrants, gays are weird, all of those people who do exist are being emboldened and pushed forward and elected into positions of power, even if they like beer,
I know lots of people that like beer. They're not all, evil. He makes them look evil. He's bad for beer drinkers.
He is, yeah.
He's like beer drinkers Caitlyn Jenner.
What? Oh, well, I suppose, yeah. I get it.
Does that make any sense?
I mean, kind of.
Kind of's a win.
Yeah, it'll do. I mean, compared to some of the stuff we've come out with on this podcast, this one's making quite a lot of sense.
Huzzah! So, but yeah, give your money to Lambda and the LCLU. Details will be in the description of this podcast.
Yes, they will. And so now, I think, sticking kind of with America, I think, and in this segment that we've titled Posy Pakka Goes to Washington, because as ever on this podcast, we make a glorious return to some Terf-based twattery. Terfs on tour, in fact, as a whole bunch of British anti-trans bigots have allegedly flown to Washington, D.C. to have several meetings with anti-abortion, anti-LGBT groups, seemingly in their never-ending quest to be terrible. Now, all of this is coming from a now-deleted blog post by disgruntled TERF Jean Hatchett, who is absolutely a transphobe in her own right, posted on her website on the 25th of January a post titled Why I Won't Be Standing for Women, which does contain some very startling accusations against the leader of the anti-trans group Standing for Women, Posy Pakka. Now, Posy Pakka has been mentioned a few times on this show before. She is the one behind the woman equals adult human female posters, although, the one that basically makes her sound like a Dalek. Alert, human female detected. So that Posy Pakka, right? So in the post, Jean Hatchett details how she was planning to join Pakka and several other anti-trans activists on a trip to the US to protest outside of Twitter's headquarters, but she became hesitant when she discovered that the group was allegedly going to meet with the Women's Liberation Front, which is another TERF group who back in 2017 sought and received funding from the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a right-wing evangelical group which campaigns against abortion, against women's rights, against LGBT rights, and against same-sex marriage. Now, Hatchett has allegedly objected to this alleged meetup with a group who takes money from misogynists, as well as a meeting allegedly proposed with the Heritage Foundation, who is somebody else whose name has crossed my desk, another right-wing group, because they campaign also against abortion, against women's rights, against LGBT rights, and against same-sex marriage. Are you spotting the theme? So, again, this all comes from one blog post which has subsequently been deleted, and whilst we here at the podcast believe it's credible, due to Jean Hatchett being a long-standing and fairly prominent Twitter transphobe who wouldn't really have much of a reason to lie, the fact remains that all of this is alleged. Okay? However, just before we started to record this, Standing for Women's Posy Pakka posted a video on her Facebook page of herself and several others protesting outside Twitter's headquarters, as well as the headquarters of Facebook and the Human Rights Campaign. And in attendance is at least one member of Women's Liberation Front holding a banner for Hands Across the Aisle, which, if you've not heard of that, is a coalition of far-right and TERF groups who, according to their website, have come together to challenge the notion that gender is the same as sex. This coalition also includes the anti-LGBT group American College of Pediatricians, so named because it sounds authoritative, but they are listed by the Southern Poverty Law Centre as a fringe anti-LGBT hate group. During the GRA consultation here in the UK last year, Posy Pakka became more or less infamous for her absolutely obsessive hatred of trans people, and so if there's anything to take away from this, these supposed feminists have got no problem selling out their beliefs in gender equality and in women's bodily autonomy and LGBT rights. They're quite happy to meet up with and take money from people that want nothing else but the dialing back of all of these rights if it means sticking it to trans people. Be under no illusions. These ties to hate groups are really, really hard to argue with. Posy Pakka and her gaggle of gits over here in the UK have worked with anti-LGBT and anti-woman Member of Parliament David T.C. Davis before, and now these same people are reaching out to the hateful far right in the United States as well, often with some success. The message is clear, these people are hypocrites. Their hatred is driving them into the arms of the far right, and honestly, at this point, it is getting much, much harder to actually differentiate between the two. I have been saying for a long time, and I said this at, I think, the Trans Day Remembrance event here in Manchester last November, scratch a transphobe, find a racist. It's astonishing just how often bigotries clump together in the same person. You find somebody who is homophobic, you'll usually find they've got some other problems too. It's astonishing, and I'm amazed. I'm still amazed that trans women aren't being listened to when we say, no, listen, this person's really bad. Obviously. So yes, basically Terfs are in bed with the far right, and so if you have supported women's place, a transgender trend, or any of that, you are literally supporting the Nazis. So well done you.
I mean, I would like to think that we don't really get a lot of listeners from that crowd. I mean, we don't really, we are a very niche podcast at the best of times.
Little bit.
Yeah, I don't think the turfy far-right people are necessarily going to be in our demo. And I'm glad of that. Because if you haven't been listening, stop. Go away. What are you doing? Go do something else. Well, actually, no, stay. Learn a thing or two. We're trans women and we're pretty great, I think. So yeah, stick around. Have a cup of tea. But don't say anything. Please don't talk. Just sit down, be quiet. And just keep the word poison in your face.
Basically, yes. But this is... I'd say this is kind of alarming, but it's also not very surprising. Honestly, this is something that you and I have talked about before. There have been groups in the UK that have genuinely received funding from the Alliance Defending Freedom and so on, and you can actually kind of trace that. And it's, people are just amazed at the cognitive dissonance of this, because there are some people who are genuinely considering themselves to actually be feminists, who are nevertheless climbing into bed with this organisation, Alliance Defending Freedom, Hands Across the Aisle or whatever, that would just as soon see women describing themselves as feminists burned at the stake. But because they're so retrograde, because they're so backwards looking and insisting that things are as they say they are and no other idea could possibly be countenanced, here they are in bed with the Nazis. And the fun thing is, though, I know there's Handmaid's Tale, which is very good. I don't know if you've read it. There was a little bit that was in the book that was not in the series, where the people it's like a flashback, people that are taking over the country are in league with radical feminists and they're burning pornography. But in the book, they're portrayed as kind of unwitting pawns of the far right, and they themselves are kind of purged, and the whole social system of A Handmaid's Tale then kind of takes place. So in the book, they're being used as, useful
foot soldiers.
Well, as in kind of, people who are usefully on your side, even though it's not going to be good for them, And it's just interesting, life imitating art or something, or perhaps, yes. So, but there's a pedigree to this as well, because there was a whole thing called the lesbian sex wars, or the feminist sex wars in the sort of 70s and the 80s. And so sex shops had their windows smashed and were burned down because they were anti-feminist, apparently, saying that women can't possibly consent to anything and sex shops shouldn't exist, blah, blah, blah. There's another couple of well-known UK transphobes who were actually involved in this movement. back in the day, but again, that's a story for another time. So this really terrifying link between anti-trans people describing themselves as feminists who are still quite happy to get into the bed with literally the Nazis. It's not good. It is not good. And it's something that, honestly, we need to keep an eye on and call out and point out when you see it. So, anyway,
I think that's the takeaway from this. Basically, don't fall for their crap, because this is who they are. Sort of an unofficial rule of this pod I want to try and put in is that we try and end every news story with some kind of thing you could do to combat it. Because we could just talk about how things are crap and then just leave it and everybody just gets sad. Whereas there are actual things that you, the listener there, you with the headphones on, can do. You can do things. But in this case, it's pretty simple. Just don't listen to their shit, because they're full of it. And
tell your friends they're full of it.
Have no morals, have no ethics, and they're just very, very... They're addicted to the big hate thing. They love the hate so much, and they go find their other people that love to hate, and they just sit there in a big hate circle, hating each other off, just, hate wanking each other to death. So, just walk straight past the hate wank circle. Just don't bother with it.
Yeah.
Go home and have a love wank.
Yeah.
I don't know what any of that means, but you get the idea.
Yes. So, but yeah, this needs to be, if you see this happening, if someone's spouting this sort of thing, call it out. If it's safe for you to do so. But yeah, call it out, keep an eye out, don't fall for their bullshit. What's next?
Last bit of news, and a very, very quick one. Trans actor and all-around fantastic woman Jen Richards has been cast as a cis woman on an American TV show.
Woo! Nice.
This is, of course, a major barrier broken, as for the longest time trans people could barely get cast as trans people on TV, let alone as cis people. The show, called Blind Spot, it's on NBC and on Sky Living in the UK. Jen is playing CIA agent Sabrina Lauren. Check her out. This never happens.
Yeah, this is great. And I love Jen Richards, as I've possibly mentioned, I don't know how many times before. Because she was responsible for the web series Her Story, which I saw and loved and thought it was absolutely excellent. Yeah, it was super good. We like.
Everyone should support her wonderful career, because she's pretty great. And she's getting paid work to play people that aren't trans, which I have, up until very recently, never heard of before.
Yeah, it's not a thing that comes up. So, okay, so I think that's the end of the news, isn't it? Which is quite nice. So you might have noticed with my return, the format has thus far seemed relatively similar, but this time we've had a few discussions about what the direction of the podcast is, and we're going to try and do something a little bit different, and we're going to try and put out actual messages from within the trans community itself, try to signal boost and try to encourage and try and empower, because that's how this stuff works. So the first one of these, shall we say, community messages is essentially summed up by LGBT journalism is suffering, so you should become a journalist. While we were doing internet things and preparing for this episode, we just kept running into the same stories over and over again. Journalists in the UK and the US are increasingly under threat of being laid off because the digital news bubble has begun to burst, which is thanks to a combination of things, decreasing ad sales and, of course, Zuckerberg being absolutely the fucking worst. A lot of online publications are finding it much, much harder to just keep the lights on. So this has a devastating impact on specialist LGBT news desks, ones attached to larger publications as they often are, and they tend to be the first to go in downsizing. So, and this also has a knock-on effect on the specialist LGBT press itself, as the money just isn't rolling in as once it did. So last week, BuzzFeed began the process of laying off 15% of its staff, and this started off with laying off, amongst others, all but one of the full-time journalists on their LGBT desk. This wasn't an isolated incident, and if you're interested in hearing more about this, there's actually an excellent article on BuzzFeed by Trish Bendix, which ironically was posted on the same day that the layoffs began. So this lays out the current landscape, and I would definitely urge you to check it out. Again, we've put the link for it in the description of the episode. So why am I telling you this? Because we need to support queer media. We need to support LGBT journalists, and we especially need to support trans journalists. Seek them out, follow them, read their stuff, subscribe. We need more voices in all of this media noise, not less. We Michelle and I, we're a low-tech startup. We don't have many overheads. We can more or less report what we like, and we're in a position to not worry about that because our costs are basically just hosting and a couple of mics we got off Amazon back in the early part of last year. But LGBT journalism, it needs eyes, it needs ears, but it needs ads and it needs clicks too. Go and support it. Get involved.
Actually, I don't think I told you about this, Ash, but there was... On Twitter, I was contacted by someone who was just like, oh, wow, I can't believe you're doing this podcast. It's something that I've thought about doing, but, never really... But then we saw what you're doing, and you guys have done a slick enough job, we're probably not going to bother. And I was like, what?
No, do the thing.
Do the thing. Don't let us stop you. Like we're a slick podcast. I'm literally sat in the corner of my bedroom with a desk I made out of bits of wood. Like, I'll take a picture and put it up on the website or something. It is a ridiculous setup we have. I do this entire thing pretty much off my iPad. And not even a good iPad, a pretty crappy iPad. It isn't hard, and there should be more trans podcasts. It is ridiculous that we're the only people doing this.
Well, I'm not sure we absolutely are, but the point is...
We are the only UK-based trans news podcast. There are other trans podcasts, but they tend to be more... personal, story stuff, sort of documentary based, Fox Fisher has one. I can't remember the name of it.
Yes.
I will totally put the details of that in the description as well, because that is a really good one. But yeah, we're the only people that do this specifically, which is a shame, because, there should be more of this. If you're listening, start a podcast. We're not going to be in competition. This isn't a money-making enterprise. Hell, come on our podcast. You could be a guest and promoter, and we'll come on yours and promote and help. And you can promote ours. We're all in this together. Become a journalist. It's good fun, and we need it.
It's very true. So yes, let's build each other up, rather than seeing everything as a competition. So to this end, just before we get on to the fun and games media stuff, which I'm going to hand over to Michelle for. One last thing, a little bit, which is, I'm going to tell you about a hashtag, right? So it's a hashtag trans crowdfund. Okay? So if you've got a crowdfunding promotion to tell people about, so over the last couple of weeks, trans people have united on Twitter to get the hashtag trans crowdfund going to promote their crowdfunding campaigns for surgeries, for healthcare, for art projects, and other such wonderful things. So if you have a few quid burning a hole in your pocket, or if you've got a crowdfunder on the go and you need somewhere to boost it, promote it, then you should look up that hashtag. Hashtag trans crowdfund. Once again, full details in the description.
Yeah, that was talked about on the Hbomberguy stream, and I think there was one non-binary person who was doing a crowdfunder because they needed a new wheelchair and they lived in America. So, they have to pay for those there. And their crowdfund got...
you do here as well, Michelle, but again, story for another time.
Yeah. But, they announced their crowdfunder on the stream, and within 10 minutes, they'd completely boosted their target and broken through it by 20 grand or something. There's a lot of love out there for trans people right now, and if you need the money for something, if you need treatments, if you've got a film you want to make, if you need some cash to get your own enterprise started, now's the time. Get on that hashtag.
It is now, and it is current, but another thing that is now is, it's transgender pop culture disorder, which I assume that's what the segment's still called. I don't know. We haven't had a discussion about that.
I was thinking of dropping it and just having this as a community announcement, because this is media stuff that I'm signaling.
That's true. That's true.
I don't know. We'll figure it out. I'll see what happens in the edit. See what works.
Nice. Well, I'm sure we will just continue with our usual ethic of making this shit up as we go along.
So, okay, got some media stuff to go through. There's a new movie out now that has a whole bunch of trans in it, and it's pretty great. It's a pretty good movie. Colette, starring Keira Knightley as the title character Colette, is a biopic covering the early years of the French artist, performer, and author of the Claudine books, which sort of invented the young adult novel, sort of.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, very much invented the teen girl subgenre, by the very least. But yeah, it sort of slipped under my radar, and it hasn't really made that much money at the box office, but it is noteworthy because it includes Mathilde de Morny as a character, a famous French artist from the late 1800s, early 1900s, who is probably some kind of trans. It's kind of debated, and I don't want to get into that because I am in no position to make a judgment on that. But in the movie, Matilda is portrayed as having several different names that they go by, and both going by she, her, and he, him pronouns, depending on which character is talking about them. I don't want to get into that. The portrayal of Matilda by Denise Gough isn't bad. Not sure if having a cis actress playing them is appropriate or not, due to the question mark about the original Matilda's gender identity. But the movie also features brief appearances by trans actors Jake Graff and Rebecca Root, who are also seemingly playing cis characters. I mean, they could have been trans characters, but they never said. They just presented as, this is Jake Graff, this is Rebecca Root. And nobody says otherwise, so I'm assuming they're cis. But anyway, the movie is delightfully queer. Got lots of Keira Knightley wearing suits and, going down on women and men in various configurations. And it's a pretty great movie. Check it out. It's out now, and it's been out since the 11th. I didn't get a chance to see it until recently. And it didn't really get a super wide release, but so, check it out now in the cinema if it's near you, or, check it out when it's on demand or Blu-ray or whatever later in the year. And finally, GLAAD have just released their list of nominees for their 30th Media Awards shows, which take place on the 28th of March in Los Angeles and the 4th of May in New York. The nominees are mostly LGB related, and to be fair, if you are stuck for something to watch tonight, you could do worse than picking one of those shows or movies nominated at random, because they're all pretty good. But the exciting news is that both Pose and Supergirl have received nominations in the Best Drama Series. Pose, I've gone on about a lot on this show. It's set in the 80s in New York, around the ballroom scene, sort of like a Paris is Burning kind of thing. It stars an absurd number of trans people in trans roles, and it is excellent. If you haven't seen it, check it out, and it is my pick to win everything across the board. There are rumours that it will be coming to the BBC later this year, and it will be available on iPlayer, and I will let you know when that happens, because you have to watch it, you bunch of yahoos. It is great. Also, Supergirl was nominated, probably because of its prominent lesbian character and sister to Supergirl, Alex Danvers, but also because of trans superhero Nia Nal, played by trans actor Nicole Maines. You could catch the show on Sky One in the UK. You should totally check it out. It's crashy, unsubtle melodrama with explosions and awesomeness. Check it out. Also nominated, I Am Jazz, the reality show covering the life of trans teen Jazz Jennings. That's been nominated for Outstanding Reality Programme. So yeah, check out all the nominees for the whole thing on their website, glaad.org, and go find some lovely queer stuff to watch, because there's a lot of it this year. A lot. And it is glorious.
And that is what I was just thinking then, hearing you say that, talking about Pose and Supergirl receiving nominations, was that, did you have to clean up afterwards after you heard that news or something? Because that's the most pleasing possible news for you in that sense, I guess. Well,
yeah, but the thing is, they both got snubbed at the Golden Globes, so I'm not getting my hopes up this time. And there's also a lot of good shows in this, A Very English Scandal is in the same category, and if that I wouldn't mind, because that was excellent. There's a lot of good stuff this year.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, flying the trans flag, I want Pose to win everything.
Of course.
But I wouldn't be too heartbroken if it didn't, because, there's a lot of good queer TV in America right now, and a lot of good queer movies. It's a good time for to be, it's very good to be LGB at the very least. In media terms.
In media terms. Well, I was going to say, let's not dig too much into the precise power dynamics that are behind that, perhaps. But yes, I do see what you mean. It is good to see that there is so much queer content now, that there are just more people producing their own queer content, and there's streaming services now, Netflix, whatever. So yeah, wonderful. Good stuff.
So, okay, up next for our main event, our hot take, we are going to talk about Brazil.
Yes.
Now, at the beginning of this month of January, a new president was sworn in by the name of Jair Bolsonaro. And to give you some background on him, he started off his career serving in the Brazilian army during a military dictatorship that went on from 1964 to 1985. He then went into politics. His views could be described as slightly left of Hitler, but not by much. And that's not hyperbole when I say that. I mean, I wish it was. I am, as the listeners will know, I am fond of hyperbole, but this time I am being deadly serious. He has come up with some absolute Wonderful, wonderful turns of phrase, including telling a female federal deputy, "I would never rape you because you don't deserve it." He has claimed that the only mistake of the military dictatorship was that they tortured people and not killed them, and that he would attack and kill his son if he came out as gay. This is a man who has been called the Trump of the tropics, but that is underselling how bad this is. This guy makes Trump look like Tony Blair.
And he's got a real hard-on for the military dictatorship that he served in. So, he's represented the state of Rio de Janeiro as a politician between 1991 and 2018 in the Chamber of Deputies, as a member of the Social Liberal Party, which to me is particularly hilarious because it's neither social nor liberal. His vice president is Hamilton Mourão, who is also a retired military dude. He was a general, and that guy, has voiced his support for the whole idea of returning Brazil to being a military dictatorship. So how did this dickhead get elected, right? So the former president, Luiz Inácio from the Lula da Silva, which is the Workers' Party, he was the favourite, but he was banned due to his conviction for corruption and money laundering. So the whole accusations of and convictions for corruption is something that looms large in Brazilian politics, it would seem. So Bolsonaro has actually run on his platform. He was talking about reducing crime and tackling corruption. Crime has gone through the roof recently. The murder rate is high, even for cis people. It's 32.7 murders per 100,000. For context, the number for the people, the murder rate in the UK is 2 people per 100,000. And as listeners of this podcast and people who look at the news every November are sure to be aware, roughly 100 trans people are murdered in Brazil every year, and we suspect and fear that this number is going to rise under Bolsonaro. So the fact that the former president has been corrupt and has been in a corruption scandal has fueled and fed Bolsonaro's campaign. Similarly to our friend to the north of Brazil, Donald Trump, a lot of people in his voter base are young and they don't remember the nightmare that was the military dictatorship, which is why we're seeing, I think this is tied into a similar impulse, which is why neo-Nazism is on the rise amongst the young in the US and in Europe, because the people who are becoming interested in it and getting into it and becoming far-right fuckwits don't remember what it was like the first time. They don't have any personal experience. They assume their grandparents are overstating it. They assume the Holocaust is told all out of proportion, blah, blah, blah. Seemingly, the communication tool WhatsApp has become home to a huge hotbed of misinformation, which is led by supporters. They share all this information, start rumours created. I assume it's some sort of, 4chan on your smartphone.
Yeah, it's like they've got a massive fake news problem, just like the US. The far right there is using a lot of the of similar tactics. They've got their own version of sort of the Tea Party there, or Britain First here, the Free Brazil movement. That was a big factor in it. There's a lot of factors, but the basic thing that I took from what I've been researching about this guy is that he was a chancer. He was an opportunist, and this was an opportunity that would maybe come up once in a lifetime for him to grab it, and he did. It's just all of these things were just in the right place. And it's now a terrifying time to be a transgender person in Brazil.
As if it kind of wasn't already. So the latest developments, Bolsonaro has been sworn in as the president of Brazil earlier this month, and if we say this month, we mean January. He's been president for a mere number of weeks. Now, John Wiley's an elected member of the Chamber of Deputies since 2011, and a man who is openly gay, has now fled Brazil after he received after receiving threats of violence both to him and aimed at his family. He told a Brazilian newspaper, "Why would I want to live 4 years of my life in an armoured car with bodyguards? 4 years of my life when I can't just go where I want to go." So he's repeatedly clashed with Bolsonaro when the pair of them were lawmakers, but he now fears for his life, basically, due to rising tension in the country, and he's left. So,
smart move by the sounds of it. It sounds like a goddamn nightmare to be an openly gay man in a public place like that.
particularly when he's talking about, killing his son rather than accepting him as a gay man. And so just for context, I think let's have some quotes from the man himself, where he came out and said in 1997, so this was after he started his career as a lawmaker, the military police should have killed 1,000 people rather than 111 prisoners in the Carandiru massacre. He's also said that he's been in favour of torture. The previously mentioned comment about I wouldn't rape you because you didn't deserve it. And this little gem, competence, well, it's a problem for each deputy. If I want to hire a prostitute for my office, I'll hire her. And if I want to hire my mother, I'll hire her. It'll be my problem, which is, interesting when it comes to him leading a campaign talking about tackling corruption and nepotism, but I guess it doesn't seem to apply to him.
That is some very unique hiring practices. Like, some might say he's a visionary in the field of human resources.
Absolutely, certainly very creative thinker in terms of rhetoric. But there's only so much that Michelle and I can say about this.
So, whilst I was on the charity stream, the Hbomberguy stream, a non-binary trans girl came on to talk about her experiences in Brazil and also to cover the recent events. And I thought it'd be a good idea to ask her to come on the podcast. And she did. Her name's Alice. She's a young non-binary trans girl living in Brazil. And yeah, we talked to her about all of this stuff. So yeah, here it is.
Hello, my name is Alice. I'm a young photographer from southern Brazil. I'm a non-binary trans girl. And yeah, I mostly did most of my work was around the protests against Bolsonaro before the election, so I mainly photographed those. And yeah, that's what I did, and that's who I am.
Fantastic, thank you. So for the benefit of an audience who might not be familiar with this a little bit already, could you tell us just a little bit about the cultural presence of trans and gender non-conforming in Brazil?
Well, Brazil and Latin America in general has a very long story of trans people. We actually, here in South America, we have a unique native identity, which is, we call here, it's called transvestite, but it has a very different meaning from the English word. And anyway, that's a trans identity that's unique to Brazil. I can't personally speak much about it because it's not my identity, but just goes a long way to talk about how Brazil has a cultural presence of trans people since a very long time. But we also have a very long culture of transphobia here. Brazil was, of course, colonized and very turned to Catholicism and the sometimes very extreme version of Catholicism and evangelicalism. And so we also, because of that extreme religious influence and the already existing culture of trans people and gender non-conformance, so there is a real climate of transphobia here as well. And that really starts coming to clashing in this modern age when new trans identities and trans people become more prominent. Now we know how. Now people are finally speaking out about how Brazil is such a transphobic country. We actually hold the record for most trans people murdered here for transphobic reasons, according to the Transgender Murder Monitoring Project.
So I think quite a lot of our audience, of all of the things that we know about Brazil as trans people, that's probably one of them. As you say, the rate of the murder rate and the violence is something that makes it out of the country, which is shocking and disheartening and saddening for all of us, I'm sure. So moving into what we've already been discussing so far about what's going on there now, you mentioned the recently elected President Bolsonaro. So was that a surprise when he's won this election, or was that something that you kind of expected?
I mean, rationally, I kind of expected him to win, but emotionally it was a big surprise. You can't, after hearing all that he said, I couldn't really emotionally process that guy could win the election. So yeah, when he won, it was not rationally, but emotionally a big surprise to me.
Yes, I can see that. I know Michelle and I had sort of heard his name beforehand because of obviously all the things that he's said in the past.
Yeah, I first heard of him maybe a few years ago where Stephen Fry was doing a documentary and he met Bolsonaro as, I guess, sort of a bit of a joke in the documentary at, like, how backwards this guy is and how revolting his homophobia was. And that's the first time I heard of him. And I never saw this coming because he was just, to me, he was a joke on a documentary. And he's now this thing, which sounds horrible.
He rose to power really quickly. Like, he was like kind of an ignored congressman. He was just like sitting there doing basically nothing. Sometimes there would be a minor scandal, but it would just blow over. But then when the election came, he rose really quickly to like prominence.
Yeah, it did seem slightly meteoric, and it was also, I know we heard from here that there was a lot of rhetoric in his campaigning about fighting corruption, and that was the thing that people were worried. That was his populist claim, to be fighting the rampant corruption, although I suspect, as we'll probably see a little bit later on, that's not something he's immune to himself. Overall, I know UK media has been quite muted, quite quiet on coverage of Brazil since the election. So what's been the feeling, what's been the reaction from the Brazilian media about this?
Well, the Brazilian media itself is really split because it's really a battle of interests. Like, one of the major news networks here is fully behind him. Another major one called Globo is now starting to attack him a little bit. But it's really just like, I view it really cynically, which is just like, he is starting to break with a bit of the traditional views that some of the media supports, while complementing other networks' views. So it's just a battle of the media, really. It's like really split, just self-interest is divine.
Of course. We're seeing a lot of that recently, I think. Politicians governed by self-interest more than anything else. Obviously, a lot of comparisons out there are drawn to Donald Trump, of course. And after Trump was elected, one of the first things that his regime did, one of their first moves, was to just strip out and eliminate any mention of LGBT issues from things like government websites, service provisions, and so on. So because obviously Bolsonaro's really only been sworn in power for a number of weeks just now, has there been a similar series of immediate actions under Bolsonaro?
Some unrelated to the LGBTQ, there has been the extinction of the Ministry of Labor and the Ministry of Culture, and related to LGBTQ rights, the Ministry for the Rights of Human and Human Rights has been named the Ministry of Family and Human Rights, and inside that ministry there was a department for LGBTQ issues and the upholding of rights, and that has been thrown out of the window really quickly. Some health booklets made for trans men, which were really helpful. I'm trans fan, but I took a look of them, and they were really informative and humane. They were pulled almost immediately. And yeah, the new Minister of Family is evangelical transphobe, and that advocates conversion therapy. So yeah, it's just like, there have been a lot of immediate impact, but in the long run, it's probably going to get way worse.
It's only been, as we say, it's been, sort of less than a month since he was fully 27 days. Gosh, as we record this, chances are, by the time this episode actually goes live, it'll be 3 or 4 more days. But so obviously with this stuff all happening absolutely immediately, what's been the response from the LGBT and the trans communities about this?
Honestly, it's kind of mixed because already Brazil is a hard place to be a public trans person with all the transphobia here. So it's kind of like there has been a lot of rush to do your name change paperwork. Gay marriage is like on skyrocketed just before he got sworn in. It's really a rush to get like everything that we can do with our rights in order before they are taken away. And really, it's kind of just fear mostly. There haven't been any major protests against him yet this year. It's very scary more scary than it already was to resist him. So we just kind of got bit back into the shadows, really. As
it may have been previously. I mean, I know he's alarmed a lot of people, hasn't he? Not just the LGBT community. I know he's given there was that pro-business speech that he gave that was really scary to a lot of environmental activists, as obviously what he said is he harmonise the environment with much-needed economic development, which basically a lot of people have interpreted that he is going to... So it's terrifying across the board. But aside from the obvious, what do you think needs to happen now?
Well, really now, I don't think I don't think he might. There is a possibility he might get impeached for the corruption scandals that are appearing around him.
I see.
But really, the most important thing now, I think, is doing community work with the local trans people in Brazil, because really, just trans people don't really have the strength to fight him on our own. So, just uniting so we can minimize the damage and eventually, hopefully, beat him is the most important thing right now, I think.
Yeah. No, I would agree. Sort of stand together and raise up those community groups. And there are ways that people from outside Brazil can help, aren't there? By non-governmental organisations?
Yes. I'd recommend a stonewall.org.uk article, which is an interview with Brazilian trans activists, which recommends some non-profit orgs. Another very important thing that people outside Brazil can do to help is provide help for individual trans people here, some that may need to leave Brazil because of the scare, some that might just need help to continue working here, some might need help with just medical stuff. So yeah, really, there are two fronts that really need help here.
So yeah, you might be listening to this, you might be thinking that you feel quite powerless and that this is tremendous and that they're tremendously awful and there isn't anything you can do. There is something you can do. You can support, you can donate, you can signal boost, you can keep the conversation happening outside of Brazil and highlighting these issues to the people that need to hear about them.
So, Alice, hey, this is Michelle. How are you and your friends doing? Are you okay?
Honestly, I've not really... I'm trying to avoid the news mostly because just reading it is damaging to mental health, so I'm just kind of coasting along right now. Just trying to live.
How much has this affected your day-to-day so far? I know it's only been a few weeks, but have you already noticed changes in the atmosphere of places you go, or...
Well, since the election, since a bit before the election, actually, everyone's been on the left in general has been way more discreet about their position. It's what I talked about before, about being beat back into the shadows. It's really that. It's just, you can't express yourself like you could anymore. It's just dangerous to be yourself in public. It was already dangerous, but it's now more dangerous and scarier.
Are you finding that the rhetoric in the media that you have seen has changed, or is it mostly stayed the same? Is the news there reporting on this like it's just another president, it's just not business as usual, or are they saying that this is a not normal situation?
It really depends on the network. Some are calling out his corruption, which is mostly out of their own self-interest. Some are supporting him, but that's mostly just about the corruption scandals. There hasn't been much news about the effects on the LGBTQ people, beyond a few articles.
Okay, and I guess the last thing, because that's pretty much my few questions I have, is there anything else you want to say?
Well, I'd just like to reinforce the importance of signal boosting people from here, listening to people from here, and really just trying to understand and support the local people here. I think that's the best way to help, really. It's the most effective way to help for people outside of Brazil. And yeah, we will keep fighting on here until the end.
Well, Alice, you're welcome on the podcast anytime. If there's something you need to say, you've always got a platform here whenever you want, okay? Just hit us up on the Discord or hit us up on Twitter or something and we'll sort it out, okay?
Thanks.
And thank you for joining us and being so honest and telling us about what it's like. Thank you so much.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So that was our interview with Alice, whose full name we are obviously not going to give. I think there's some very sobering stuff in there, particularly for people who are outside of Brazil who may not have been aware of some of this. That wasn't a very nice conversation to have just now, was it? But it needs to be done because people need to be aware. And as we said, and as Alice said, there are organisations, non-governmental organisations that you can materially donate to signal boost, to talk about. If you do a podcast or if you are a trans YouTuber, cover this stuff, highlight Brazilian voices, highlight the plight of what's going on there, and make sure people who are outside of the country are fully aware of what's going on, because we need to call this by what it is. This is fascism, straight away. There is no other description for it, and the world is tending in this direction in a really scary sort of a way, and we must be able to resist it, or, well, we might as well just roll over.
You can follow Alice on Twitter at catspaghetti with 3 T's. I'll do a link to that in the description. I'm also going to link to all of the organisations that Alice mentioned and the ones that she didn't, but she'll be sending me later on. Throw some money at them. We are a global community, and some of our friends are in a bit of a spot. Let's help them out. If you can't donate, tweet it, reshare it. Tell your friends. Tell your cis friends. Tell everyone this is going on. Let's get awareness up, because that's what we can do to help. That is an actual tangible thing we can do. It's not all doom and gloom. We can actually help. So let's do it.
Because it's needed. Support, solidarity. So links to most of the information that we've just provided as part of the podcast is in the description. We'll also likely be putting it onto our various social media platforms, our Twitter, our Facebook, to try and signal boost this. This is how it works now. This is how we're doing the podcast. Please join in. Please help us. Links, information, info, it's all in the description. And so, on that note, slightly more hopeful note than you might have been expecting, I think that is the end of the episode. So thank you very much to all of our listeners. Definitely thank you so much to Alice for joining us for this episode. Obviously, we're back from outer space, and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Michelle?
Absolutely, it's good to have you back, Ash, because you are a lot better to talk to than my bedroom wall. Now, you can hit us up on all the socials. We got a Twitter at WhatTheTrans. We got a Facebook, facebook.com/WhatTheTrans. And I have built a whole new website on Tumblr, which took me like a full day. I now hate Tumblr. I never want to see it again. But, send us some messages and then drag us back. You can get to us on there at whatthetranspod.tumblr.com. That is also our homepage. That'll be where all the references from this episode will be linked. You can send us messages, you can reblog, whatever that means. You can do all of the Tumblr things on there. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day, week, month, whatever it is for you.